Death is a topic many prefer to avoid, but there are times when it becomes impossible to ignore. Especially when someone we love is in their final days, the deepest questions arise in our minds. What truly happens in an elder's last moments of life? Is there something they see, feel, or understand that we, the living, cannot grasp? Accounts from doctors, nurses, and family members speak of expressions of peace, gazes at an invisible point, and even unexpected smiles as if they were witnessing something we cannot see. Researcher Ian Stevenson, known for decades of serious studies on spiritual themes, found a case so rare it defies simple explanations. A case that suggests, moments before departing, some souls receive a kind of revelation, a vision that not only brings comfort, but changes the perception of what it means to cross that threshold. If you're here, it's because this subject also sparks your curiosity, or perhaps even offers a comfort you didn't know you needed. What God shows an elder's soul in those final seconds might be an answer to many questions we carry throughout our lives. And understanding this phenomenon can ease deep fears, both for those who dread their own death and for those who have grieved the passing of a loved one. That's why it's important to follow every detail of this narrative. And if you feel this content brings you something of value, please remember to support this channel simply with a like and a subscription, so we can continue bringing stories that make us ponder life and what comes after it. The story you are about to hear happened to an 87-year-old man who lived in a small town in rural America. He wasn't famous. He didn't write books or give interviews. He was an ordinary man who lived a simple life, raised children and grandchildren, and reached old age like so many others. But something happened in his final moments that caught the attention of doctors, nurses, and later, Ian Stevenson. The elderly man, already aware that he was in his last days, began to speak of things no one understood. He said he saw a soft light, but he didn't use religious words to describe it. He spoke of a peaceful path, of people who seemed familiar, but he couldn't recall their names. The most surprising thing was that in his final minutes, he reported something unlike anything previously recorded in other studies. As he struggled to breathe, he held his son's hand and firmly stated that he saw a scene before him. It wasn't a tunnel. It wasn't a distant light. He described something like an open field where younger people, who seemed like a mix of acquaintances and strangers, smiled at him. Then his eyes brightened, and he uttered a few words that left everyone in silence. He said that now he understood why he had lived exactly as he had, and that everything was connected in a way he had never imagined. These words puzzled those present. His son recounted that he had never seen him speak with such clarity about the meaning of his own life. Minutes later, the elder closed his eyes and passed away peacefully. But what truly stood out was what happened next. The family, curious and shaken, decided to report the episode to a local doctor, who, by chance, was already familiar with Ian Stevenson's work. And that's how the case reached the researcher. Stevenson, accustomed to dealing with accounts of near-death experiences, reincarnation, and inexplicable memories, realized there was something different here. What made this case so unique wasn't just the account itself, but the way the elder described his experience. Stevenson noticed that he didn't speak of a traditional heaven or religious figures. What he described was something more subtle and at the same time more profound. A feeling of total comprehension, as if he had received an explanation that linked all the pieces of his life, from childhood to that very moment. This raised an important question. Could it be that, in the final seconds, the soul receives a kind of summary of what it has lived and what each choice has meant? Stevenson delved into this question, and the investigation revealed something that might change the way we view our final moments. Stevenson began by investigating everything he could about the elder's life, seeking to understand if there were cultural or religious factors that might have influenced the account. He discovered that the man had not attended church for over 40 years, did not read spiritual books, and rarely spoke about faith with his family. His life had been centered on farm work, dedication to his children, and silence on profound topics. This made the case even more intriguing, because what he described didn't seem to stem from memories of old readings or ingrained beliefs. It was something experienced so intensely that it defied easy explanations. The researcher gathered testimonies from everyone present at the time of death, and noticed an impressive convergence. All described the brightness in his eyes, the serenity in his tone of voice, and the clarity with which he spoke of things he had never said before. This convergence led Stevenson to propose a bold hypothesis. What if, in the final moments, God truly shows something to the soul, something that goes beyond religious traditions and what we have been taught to believe? What if, for a brief moment, a person's entire life was revealed like a mosaic, where every mistake, success, pain, and joy finally made sense? To better understand, he compared this case to other accounts of near-death experiences, but found an essential difference. In most accounts, people described lights, tunnels, or reunions with relatives. Here there was nothing so symbolic. It was a clear, almost objective vision that brought a sense of complete understanding. And this, for Stevenson, could mean we are facing a universal process independent of culture or belief. In the following months, Stevenson analyzed every detail. He requested medical exams, checked reports, and even studied the elder's final days to determine if any medication could have caused delusions or hallucinations. But the doctors stated that he was lucid, even in his final moments. There were no traces of delirium, high fever, or strong drug use that could explain the account. This eliminated the hypothesis of a purely biological experience, such as an effect of a collapsing brain. What remained was something that required a different approach, more open to what traditional science often avoids: the possibility of a genuinely spiritual experience. Stevenson didn't want to present hasty conclusions. He knew that by disclosing something like this, he would face skepticism. Therefore, he began to document the case with the same precision he used in his most well-known studies. He recorded times, testimonies, analyzed the elder's speech, and even searched for records of dreams he might have had before his death. Nothing indicated preparation or imagination. The experience seemed to have arisen at the exact moment life left the body, like a last gift or perhaps a final lesson, and this led him to ponder a question that would touch anyone. What would we see in our last seconds? The case's impact began quietly, but soon attracted the interest of other scholars. Some suggested that the vision could be a kind of life review, an ancient idea in different cultures, but rarely documented in such detail. Others believed the elder had accessed a layer of consciousness that only reveals itself when death is very near. Stevenson, however, insisted on one point. What the man said didn't sound like someone who was merely reviewing memories, but rather like someone who was receiving an explanation. As if for an instant, the human mind were capable of understanding divine logic. The most impressive thing was the peace this account brought to the family. The son, who had held his father's hand, said he never viewed death the same way again. He told Stevenson that the feeling was that upon departing, his father had discovered something so liberating that even fear could not remain. And perhaps that is the most powerful point of the study, to show that the final moments can be much more than pain or loss. They can be a moment of revelation, of clarity, and even of encounter with something greater. Stevenson realized he needed to hear more stories like this to understand if there was a pattern. He visited hospitals, nursing homes, and spoke with dozens of families. Many reported something similar, though less intensely. Some said their relatives before dying seemed to converse with an invisible presence. Others spoke of expressions of relief, of disjointed phrases that suddenly made sense. But the case of the 87-year-old farmer stood out for its clarity. He not only described what he saw, but also conveyed a sense of total understanding, as if he had received an explanation that linked all of his life's choices. This clarity, recorded by multiple witnesses, gave weight to the study. Stevenson concluded that something extraordinary happens at the moment of death, something that transcends the boundaries between science and spirituality, a moment when the soul seems to access a kind of knowledge not available in life. Over time, Stevenson gathered so many accounts that he began to notice a common thread. People described similar sensations, as if the mind received a message that didn't come from within, but from something larger. This hypothesis made him wonder if everyone, to some degree, receives this moment of revelation before passing on. Perhaps some manage to express it in words, while others simply go silent, letting their gaze speak for them. The farmer was one of the few who found the strength to articulate what was happening, even at life's edge, and it was this courage that allowed the world to know what he saw. For Stevenson, his story was like a window into a universal mystery, a glimpse of what every human being might face when the last breath arrives. Stevenson wrote about the case in his research diary, meticulously recording every detail. He didn't intend to turn it into a headline or sensationalize it, because he knew that stories like this deserve respect. His objective was deeper, to invite people to reflect on their own mortality without fear. He believed that knowing these accounts could change how we deal with the death of our parents, grandparents, and one day our own. After all, if there is something to be seen, something shown by the hand of God itself, it could mean that we are not heading into an empty void, but toward an understanding. This idea brought comfort to many families who read the studies, because death, once a cold and silent subject, began to carry a message of meaning. The interviews also revealed an important detail. The elder's expression changed radically in his final seconds. His face relaxed, his eyes lit up, and even traces of pain disappeared. This caught the attention of the nurses, who were accustomed to witnessing death daily. They said it was as if he had received good news, something that brought immediate peace. This type of observation for Stevenson was an indication that the experience was not merely mental, but involved something that touched the essence of being. There were no shouts, no despair, no confusion, only the serenity of someone who, finally, understands. This detail reinforced the theory that the last moment can be a moment of spiritual revelation, even for those who never sought it in life. Another point that drew attention was the prolonged effect of this experience on the family. The eldest son recounted that, after hearing his father describe what he saw, he stopped fearing death. He said that for the first time, he felt that losing someone didn't mean an absolute end. This change in perception spread among grandchildren and great-grandchildren, creating a kind of invisible legacy. The elder's story was not just an individual experience, but a collective lesson, capable of transforming how an entire family viewed life and farewells. Stevenson realized that the impact of such a vision is not limited to the one departing. It extends silently to those who remain. The deeper he delved into the study, the more certain Stevenson became that cases like this deserved attention, not because they provide definitive answers, but because they raise essential questions. What truly happens at the instant we depart? Why do some people receive such clear visions, while others pass away silently? And above all, is there a purpose in this last divine gesture, in this showing of something greater? The researcher believed so. For him, these moments were like an invitation, a way of saying that death is not a fall into darkness, but a guided passage. Stevenson knew that his conclusions might unsettle both skeptics and more traditional religious individuals, but he decided that respect for the truth should come before any fear of criticism. He presented the case at conferences and received questions from all sides. Some wanted to know if the elder could have had a vivid dream or an illusion caused by a collapsing body. Others insisted that it was a celestial vision, even without clear religious references. Stevenson responded with the same calm that characterized him throughout his career. He said it wasn't about proving what each person believed, but about showing what was indeed said, observed, and documented. That was enough to open space for reflection. Because regardless of the interpretations, something was there, a singular experience, lived in the most delicate moment of human existence. Time passed, and the story of the 87-year-old farmer gained traction among scholars, caregivers, and even grief support groups for families. Many began to see death in a less somber light. The case became a symbol of hope, not because it promised miracles, but because it offered a glimpse of meaning. The idea that in the last seconds we might see something that connects our entire life brought comfort to those who had lost parents, grandparents, or friends. And this perhaps is Ian Stevenson's greatest legacy. More than a researcher, he was someone who opened a door to conversations we avoid, but which need to happen. Thanks to his work, the fear of the unknown transformed into curiosity, and the inevitable pain of grief found a space to be eased by understanding. However, Stevenson never wanted his study to be seen as a final answer. He insisted that his role was not to state exactly what the soul sees, but to faithfully record what was told by those who lived that transition, This stance made all the difference because it lent credibility to the case. He did not exaggerate, did not try to fit the account into any specific belief, but simply described what he heard. And this, paradoxically, led people from different religious traditions to find something to hold on to. Each person read the story and interpreted it in their own way, but everyone seemed to agree on one point. The elders' experience showed that the end can be more human, more serene, and even more beautiful than we usually imagine. When one reads Stevenson's records, it's impossible not to think about one's own destiny. At some point, we will all face that final line. And perhaps the greatest lesson from this case is that there's no reason to imagine death as a frightening void. The farmer, with his illuminated gaze and calm words, left an unintentional message for all who heard his story. He showed that, in those moments, something greater is happening. Perhaps it's an answer. Perhaps it's an invisible embrace. Perhaps it's just the belated understanding that life had a purpose. But whatever it is, it seems sufficient to transform fear into calm. This reflection leads us to an inevitable question. Are we prepared for that moment? Stevenson didn't offer formulas. He didn't speak of rituals or secrets. But he left a valuable clue. He showed that life gains a new dimension when we understand that, in the end, something can be revealed. This makes us look at the present differently, as if every gesture, every word, and every choice were part of a larger picture that we will only see complete in the last instant. For many, this perception changed everything. Not just about death, but about the life they still have. If you've made it this far, perhaps you've felt the same silent calling that this story awakened in so many people. It doesn't bring certainties, but it invites reflection on what truly matters. Perhaps this is the greatest gift we can receive from an account like this, the chance to live more consciously, more openly, and less fearfully of what is to come. And if this message spoke to your heart, please share this video and subscribe to the channel. That way more people can discover that death is not just an end, but an instant when the soul can finally glimpse something that has always been waiting to be revealed.